Now, don't be afraid to cut your plants. They actually need this and they respond really well to it. Another vigorous grower that I am going to cut back slightly. A friend had introduced me to these. I bought a couple of packages and I really like the way they work. Because these crystals are so tiny, you don't really think there's going to be enough in the container, but once you water and they start expanding, a few weeks ago, these containers were freshly planted, but now that the summer heat is here, it takes a little bit of work to keep them looking their best. So today I'm going to share with you 6 tips that will keep your containers thriving all season long. Or maybe just lovers, 'cause under the covers, baby, you're showing me. Hi, it's Steph. Welcome back to our garden. As we go through and I share these tips with you, I'm also going to share what I planted in my containers this year. We'll start with number 1, watering. Watering is super important to keep your plants alive, but many people get this step wrong. You should water your containers deeply, which means you want to let the water really soak that root ball and drain out the bottom of your container. Some people will just sprinkle the top of the surface and think that it's sufficient. And what you really want to do is stick your finger in that soil before you start watering and see if there's moisture about an inch down. If it feels dry, it's time to water. Which brings the question, is it better to water in the morning or in the evening? It's actually preferred to water in the morning, and the reason for that is that you're hydrating your plant so it has that moisture to draw from during the hottest part of the day. However, if you can't water in the morning, watering in the evening is fine. The most important thing is to water your plants deeply and to make sure that they don't dry out. Now, in most cases, you'll just have to water your containers really deeply and well once a day. However, if it's windy out, you might have to water your containers twice because wind is exceptionally drying on containers. So what you'll want to do is stick your finger in that soil, check for moisture, and if they feel dry, give your plants an extra drink because the wind can really make them parched. And if it rains, you get a pass, which is always such a gift, especially after we've been watering our containers all season. Wind is one occasion where you might have to water your containers twice a day, but also as the summer goes on and your plants grow, those roots will start taking up more volume in those planters and containers, which means you'll have less soil in there to absorb moisture, leading to your containers drying out faster. So as your plants get bigger and as the summer goes on, you may sometimes have to water twice a day. And that means that by the time we get to July, you might be watering a lot more than you would have when you first planted your containers back in May. Now, of course, there are ways to cut down on your watering chore. You can set up drip irrigation, which I intended to do with these containers this year, but got busy with a backyard project and never got around to it. But you can also get self-watering containers that you can set up, and those you usually have to just fill the reservoir about once a week or so. I actually did that last season with my driveway planters. I used the Proven Winners aqua pots, and once the plants have had a chance to grow a little bit, put on some roots and reach for that water reservoir, it worked out beautifully. You can also use things like Oyas, which are a terracotta pot that you put into the soil. Again, you water it about once a week, and that water slowly seeps into your soil and waters your plants. And an item I learned about last year, and I've been using it ever since, is these Miracle Grow water storing crystals. A friend had introduced me to these. I bought a couple of packages, and I really like the way they work. Now, I will tell you that I made a mistake the first year that I used them, and I added more than I should have. Because these crystals are so tiny, you don't really think there's going to be enough in the container, but once you water and they start expanding, I came out to some containers that were overflowing with soil. So it's really important to pay attention to the quantity it says for the size container that you have. But these expand with water, which means they help your containers retain moisture. So I find them to be really effective. I like them. Let me know if you've used them before. It says water storing crystals help prevent over and underwatering. One thing I've learned after spending countless summer days in the garden is that what I wear matters. If I'm going to be outside deadheading flowers, watering containers, or fertilizing, I want to be comfortable, which is why I've been reaching for this dress by Quince, who is the sponsor of today's video. It is soft, breathable, and cool, and it has pockets, which never stay empty for long because they're always filled with plant tags or whatever else I find when walking around the garden. I've been buying and wearing Quince clothing for a while now, and I've genuinely been really impressed with the quality. Everything feels soft, elevated, and really well made. I picked out pieces in natural fabrics like cotton, linen, and cashmere, and they honestly feel comparable to much more expensive brands I've tried before. I also really appreciate that Quince focuses on timeless, high-quality essentials instead of trendy, fast fashion pieces. These are the kinds of clothes that feel classic and wearable year after year. They offer really beautiful quality at a more affordable price point. They also carry so much more than clothing too, including home goods, bedding, and accessories. If you want to check out Quince, use the link in my description below or scan the QR code on the screen for free shipping and 365-day returns. And thank you to Quince for sponsoring today's video. Tip number 2, fertilizing. Annuals are really hungry plants and they have some serious flower power. And in order to keep them blooming their best all season long, we have to occasionally feed them. Now, when I plant my containers, I add something like a continuous release or slow release granular fertilizer into the planting soil. Now, this is the Proven Winners continuous release plant food. It lasts up to 6 months in the container. As you water, those nutrients start coming out of that container. So as we get going and the plants start growing, I start incorporating something like a water-soluble plant fertilizer on a pretty regular basis. I try to do it every week, but I'll be honest, sometimes I get busy and I don't get to it every week. But if I get to it every 2 to 3 weeks, it's better than nothing. You take a couple of scoops, you put it into your watering can. It all depends what size your watering can is. Most of mine are 2 gallons, which means I would add 2 scoops, then I would fill it up and feed my plants with it. So remember, if your plants are looking tired, a good way to give them a boost is to feed them with some water-soluble fertilizer. It's really easy to get busy during the growing season and miss things that need to get done. So one thing that keeps me on track is little reminders like Weed It Wednesday or Fertilize It Friday. Tip number 3, deadhead and give plants a haircut. Throughout the season, if you go ahead and cut off your spent blooms, not only will it clean up your plant and make it look more tidy, it will keep it productive. So by cutting off those spent blooms, your plant is sending energy into producing more flowers. In turn, they also get bushier and you get a fuller plant. So here you can see I have some verbena that's trailing out of this container and some of the blooms are past their prime. They're spent now. So I'm gonna go through and clean those all up. Another thing that I like to do with my containers is if I have a plant that is really ambitious, for example, I find that sweet potato vines can really quickly take over a container. I do like to shear that plant back quite a bit in order to give light to the other plants that it's sharing the container with so that they can also grow equally well. And that really helps because this one wants to take over the race. And so by cutting them back a little bit, it gives the other plants a fair shot. So if you haven't yet deadheaded your plants, we are about a couple of months into the season now. It's probably a good time to go through and give your plants a haircut. Now, don't be afraid to cut your plants. They actually need this and they respond really well to it. So here you can see I'm just going to follow the stem of this spent verbena back and give it a cut. And there's already some new blooms getting ready to show off. And so I will just take all those spent blooms off to clean up the plant and encourage more blooming. Now in this container, I went with really pretty warm colors. I have this peachy keen verbena, the cascade red begonia, some of this kufia that the pollinators, especially the hummingbirds, absolutely love with this beautiful shade of orange. And here we have the Medusa sweet potato vine that is gorgeous and a really vigorous grower. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut a little bit off the back of this plant to give some more space to the begonia. And you don't have to cut a lot, just a little bit, enough to give the other plants some breathing room. Here is another gorgeous sweet potato vine. This is a new variety next year called the Bewitched After Midnight, and it is stunning, but another vigorous grower that I am going to cut back slightly to give my other plants some space. There we go. Now this coleus has a little bit more breathing room. Now, it's important to note that there are some varieties of annuals that are self-cleaning. And what that means is you don't need to go through and deadhead them. They clean themselves up. Some of the new varieties of supertunias, as well as sunpatiens and even begonias, are all self-cleaning. And then there are others that you do have to go through and clean up. Some of the old-fashioned varieties of petunias need to be regularly deadheaded and cut back, otherwise they get leggy. Geraniums, annual geraniums, also want to be cut back and deadheaded, as well as the trailing verbena that we just looked at. Another one is coleus. If you notice coleus start pushing up their blooms, you want to cut those off quickly, because once your coleus starts producing blooms, it's no longer going to produce foliage and it will get pretty scraggly and doesn't look its best. So that is one you certainly want to go through and deadhead if you notice coleus pushing up blooms. I really like the way that the containers here on my back patio turned out this season. They are a mix of reds and oranges and deep colored foliage. So here I have the Sedona Sunset Coleus in the center, and again the Kufia, as well as some of the orange Sun-Passion, the Cascade Red Begonia. I also tucked in one of the purple fountain grasses, as well as that Bewitched After Midnight sweet potato vine. And in the back, there is a new variety of salvia called the Outshine Red that the pollinators have absolutely been loving. And on this one here, I also coordinated the plantings to have the Peachy Keen Verbena, as well as the Medusa sweet potato vine, some of the orange Sun-Passion, and some of this Albrighto Coleus, which is stunning. You can see how well it picks up on the colors of the Peachy Keen Verbena and that Kufia. And right back here on our patio, underneath our deck where we have our swing, I always have my hanging baskets with Boston ferns, and I plant up these two tall planters. And this year I have also made these in those warm colors to match the other containers, and they're also looking really pretty. So I have the Peachy Keen Verbena trailing out the front, some of that Medusa sweet potato vine, an orange Sun-Passion, as well as the Albrighto Coleus and a Kufia. And I think this combination turned out really pretty, and I'm super happy with it. Tip number 4, rotate your containers. This is especially important for anywhere that you have a matching set of containers that might not get the same amount of light. By rotating them, you can make sure that they grow more evenly. So these two tall planters on my porch here, I like to have a matching set, but I always notice that the one on this side gets a little bit more sun and grows a bit faster. So every week I try to remember to rotate them so that they're both getting an even amount of sun throughout the growing season. This is really important anywhere that you have a matching set of planters, such as on a porch, by a door, maybe by a garage or a patio. And even if you have a grouping of planters, there's always going to be a couple that grow a bit better than others. So by moving them around periodically, even giving them a 180-degree turn, that will really help them get more sun and grow more evenly. So let me share with you the plants that I used on my front porch planters this year. So last summer I had used this same coleus as the centerpiece in these tall brown planters, and I liked it so much that I used it again this year. But I swapped out the filler plant that I had growing on either side. So last year I used the Supertunia Vista Paradise, which was very similar to the pink that I'm using this year. It matched the veining in this Color Blaze Torchlight Coleus beautifully. And this year I went with the Compact Rose Glow Sun-Passion. I really love Sun-Passion. As the season goes on, these will get taller and they'll be filled with blooms. They're also self-cleaning like the Supertunia, so they're low fuss. You don't really have to do anything to them. In the back, I also used one of my tried and trues, the purple fountain grass, which will get taller as the season goes on and transitions beautifully in late summer through fall. And in the front, last year I had used a sweet potato vine, and this year a friend of mine who is a gardener, Catherine, shared 2 of her extra seed starts with me. These are the Dichondra Emerald Falls. So they're different than the Silver Falls, where this one has more of a green coloration, and I think that's going to look beautiful trailing down the front of this dark container. And then on the planters coming down the steps, I used a combination of Sun-Passions and some Gara, as well as some trailing Verbena and some Angelonia, which I discovered last year and absolutely love. So I wanted to use it again this year. And my color scheme is all purples, pinks, and whites, which go really nicely with the plants that I have in my front borders. Tip number 5, save your plant tags, or at the very least, make note of the plants that you're growing in a phone, in a notebook, so that you'll remember the names. And this comes in handy if you're going to the nursery next spring. You will have that plant tag available to repurchase and regrow that plant again. I like to keep them in my containers, and then at the end of the season, I kind of evaluate how things did. I put them in a little plastic baggie so that I know which varieties I really liked. And if there's one that didn't perform well for you, you can throw that in the recycle bin, and that way you won't get confused. I also find it extremely helpful in case someone asks me what I'm growing. I don't always remember the names of annuals. I can easily pick out a tag for reference and identify that plant. So saving your tags I find extremely helpful, and I just simply tuck them into the back of the container so that they're easily accessible. No one knows that they're there. They're right in the soil, and once all of your plants grow in, they get covered. In this set of planters that I have flanking the stairs up to our walkway, I planted the Color Blaze Torchlight Coleus in the center. I really like this Coleus variety, so I went ahead and I repeated it here. But instead of the compact rose glow like I used in the front porch that had a bit more of a rosy undertone, I went ahead and planted the compact Deep Rose, and this one has more of a salmon pink coloration to it, which also goes really well with this Coleus. In the front, instead of the traditional licorice plant that has that silver coloration that I've used in the last couple of seasons, I went ahead and used this variety, which is the lemon licorice, and it has more of this chartreuse coloration to it, which I really like. And I think, again, it picks up on that green veining on the Coleus really nicely. I'm also growing some agastache. This is the Maestro Coral that the pollinators and hummingbirds absolutely love, and I tucked that in the corner there. I have another sun patient coming around this corner, and a new variety of Calibrachoa or Super Bell. And this is the Double Midnight Magenta. It's going to be new in 2027, and I'm trialing it this year, and so far it has been a really great grower. Tip number 6, learn from this year's containers. Take photos and short videos of the plants that you used and in which combination. I find this really helpful so that later in the season you can see how things performed, and next winter when you're getting excited about a new growing season, you can refer back to those photos and videos and make a more informed decision of which plants you want to use in your containers that spring, so you'll be ready to hit the nurseries with list in hand. I find that this is extremely helpful, especially if I had plants that performed really well. I'd want to grow those again. Maybe there was something that was super vigorous and wanted to take over the whole container. Maybe I wouldn't grow that plant again. Or perhaps there was something that required watering twice a day. That would probably be something that would come off my list as well. And maybe there were plants that were really attractive to pests or that stopped blooming early. So by having videos and photos or notes, you can refer back to those and really make some good decisions with your containers going forward. I did that today as we were going through and I was sharing these tips with you. I was actually taking footage of my containers so that I can see how these plants perform as we get later into the season. And this container here by our back stairs, I put some really fun bright colors. So we have some fuchsia pendants in this hot pink color. Another compact deep rose sun patient. I actually have two, one on either side. I have some creeping Jenny that just lives in this container and comes back every year. It is perennial for me. That's going to trail down the front. I have some of the Violet Ice Verbena that also looks really pretty in this container. A Luscious Berry Blend Lantana, as well as a Maestro Coral Agastache. And not only is this such a bright and fun container, the pollinators really like it. They like the fuchsia, they like the lantana, and they like the agastache. A few minutes of maintenance each week can be the difference between containers that fade halfway through the summer and the ones that look full and beautiful all the way through frost. I hope that these 6 tips help you get the most out of your containers this season. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.